Fight Back Radio, production of fightbacknews.org, taking you to the heart of the people's struggles. I'm your host, Richard Berg, and today we're going to do a deep dive into the Teamsters Union, and we have as a guest no better person to do it, Richard Blake. Richard Blake is an activist in the Teamsters, and if there's somebody more active, a rank and filer that's more active than Richard, I don't know who that is. And he comes to us from Local 512, which is in Florida, the very northeast corner of Florida, near the Georgia border, from the city of Jacksonville. And he'll tell us a little bit about that city and its importance, but he'll tell us a lot more about nationally what's going on in the Teamsters, and especially about the battle at the United Parcel Service. UPS's contract is going to expire with the Teamsters in about a year, and all of labor is looking at this, I think. It was huge back in 1997 when the Teamsters struck at UPS, and now because of a rank and file movement, they've gathered power, and they're headed towards a showdown. They're saying that, look, we're sick of the working class in this country keep going backwards, and we're going to fight for a decent wage for the part-timers in the warehouse and the drivers across the country who deliver packages from here to there or to your home. And so I think it's going to be, you'll love this interview with Richard Blake. So here it is, Richard Blake. Hello, Richard. Welcome to Fight Back Radio.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's get right into it. So the Teamsters have a big contract coming up at UPS. Why is this significant? Why should we care? Why should the listeners of Fight Back Radio care about this?
Well, I think all y'all should care about it because it's the largest private sector contract in the country, and it's kind of the premier contract in the logistics industry. And when it comes to the Teamsters, it's one of the main focuses that the Teamsters have. Is every 5 years they have the UPS contract, and this contract campaign and these negotiations are going to be pretty darn different than the prior, last couple of contracts that we've had.
Well, what you mentioned, logistics industry. What is that?
So logistics. So hopefully folks have been following, Amazon, some of the new Amazon organizing. That's considered the same industry as us at UPS, right? There's a lot of wages, benefits, and conditions that we have that they don't have because of our contract. But the last couple of contracts, the previous Teamster leadership introduced some pretty bad contract provisions that we're trying to reverse and actually advance upon, and really turn things around this next contract negotiation. But logistics is important because it's how anything gets from point A to point B. A lot of, whether it's individuals ordering things on Amazon or online in general, or it's all of the businesses that we deliver to. I mean, Teamsters in all industries make things run, but especially in logistics, it's the bread and butter of the economy of the United States.
And then for the Teamsters, this is your largest contract, I think, and it's the United Parcel Service. It's just about the only unionized logistics industry, right? Or certainly on a national level with that kind of scope.
With that kind of scope, yeah, small parcel. We actually, at the exact same time, we have organized a company called, that used to be called UPS Freight, and now it was under new ownership, and it's called T-Force, and they have a contract coming up at the same time as us. But yeah, and the UPS contract is the premier one. It's the one, the ruling class of the United States is looking at this contract to kind of get a judgment of like where the labor movement's at. It's why UPS executives are always trying to kind of calm down the investors and be like, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. But I'd argue that the Teamsters, our union this time around is making it kind of hard for the executives to keep their investors calm. We're really putting the pressure on them this time.
So you mentioned the last two contracts were problematic, and you have a new president now. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the national president of the Teamsters for a long time was Jimmy Hoffa, the son of the infamous Jimmy Hoffa, who disappeared. But he negotiated contracts, or his subordinates negotiated contracts in 2013 and 2018. And you just indicated that they weren't good. Why weren't they good? What was the problem with those contracts?
Yeah, so I was there for both of them. And, generally there's, whenever a national union, especially under Hoffa Jr., bring a contract to the members after negotiating it basically in the dark. We used to call it the brownout, right? They wouldn't tell us anything about what was going on in negotiations. Then they pull out the contract, say, isn't this the best thing in the world? The company thinks it's great. We think it's great. Y'all should think it's great. And in 2013, the members indicated that they didn't think it was great. So they rejected, I think it was 22 supplements, which is pretty darn historic. And for a big contract like ours, 22 supplements is huge. And a supplement, we have our national master contract, right? And that covers the entire country except for a couple small areas. And then supplements are regional. Like, for example, I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, so I am in the southern regional supplement. And 22 of them got rejected, and Alpha Junior didn't really know what to do. They were freaking out. They said, "Why don't you all like this?" And the members said back, "The part-time wages are still garbage. We're still dealing with these forced overtime problems." And
so was that mostly it? Was it mostly the part-time workers being upset about the wages, or was there other problems with the contract as well?
There were other problems. They were making big changes to the healthcare, making it worse. And members rejected that. Members rejected the lack of new full-time jobs. Because in UPS, the majority of workers at UPS, the people you see every day are drivers like me. We're full-time. But the majority of people, the kind of unsung heroes, work inside the buildings. And their wages, they have good health insurance, but wages they're garbage. I mean, they're not good historically. And really haven't been keeping up.
It's a hard job too, right?
It's really hard. I did it for 7 or 8 years. Waking up, you wake up at 3 a.m, go into work, throw boxes, get really, really dirty, get yelled at and yell back at managers all day. Who, unlike a driver, you're out there. Management can follow you, but you have a little more freedom. Inside the building, there's cameras everywhere.
The managers follow you around, and you're...
Yeah, they will. There's funny stories where UPS drivers will see a car following them. They'll call the police and say, there's this guy following me. I don't know if he's trying to rob me. And the cops will come and pull the guy over. And he's, no, I'm just his manager, and I've been following him for 3 hours because I got nothing better to do.
So let's go back then. So yeah. The last contract was, rejected. These supplements were rejected by people across the country, and the master agreement barely passed. Mm-hmm. Why would Hoffa and his subordinates negotiate such a bad deal? Why would they even take it to you in the first place? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this is back in 2013 when the master barely passed and all those supplements failed. So there's a common refrain that the old leadership of the Teamsters would tell. I mean, the members, tell their business agents, tell local union leadership around the country, is don't kill the golden goose. This is our main unionized workforce. We don't want to take too much out of them because Amazon will come in and get that market share if we're demanding too much in wages. If we don't make some of these cuts to healthcare, there could be an issue. If we create too many full-time jobs, UPS won't be competitive. They're basically taking the position of the company. The company's selling them this crying poverty. The national union, they're making record profits, right? Every year, every quarter, and the national union leadership under Hoffa Jr. was basically spinning that same lie to the members. And, whether they believed it or not, that's certainly what they were doing, is going along with what the company wanted, which was, we want to keep labor costs down, right? We already pay out all this money with our union contract. We don't want to pay out more. We want to keep having record profits. Want to buy a second mansion, in Long Island. Want to buy a nicer boat. Want to assure the investors that everything, that profits will continue to rise. And don't worry, the workers won't get too uppity. There won't be a strike. And even when the national union leadership was going along with that, the members didn't. I think that's when 2013, that contract is when a lot of things started to change in the IBT.
How so? What happened in 2013 that you think started tipping it the other direction?
So in 2013, when there's a famous Facebook group that got created at the time called "Vote No on the UPS Contract," and just this is back when Facebook was a lot more important. And really spread like wildfire kind of around the country. And a lot of people who were already militant saw this as a movement of people, members sticking it back to the union leadership and to the company. And, so a lot of militants got involved, but we also start to see some folks who were in the past, didn't necessarily get along with the militants, but definitely were more independent minded. And I think one of the biggest examples of that was Fred Zuckerman, who's the president of the local out in Louisville, Kentucky, Local 89. And he came out strong against the contract. He said, "This is not right. The members have spoken. We got to go back and renegotiate a better deal." And that, to have somebody of that importance, step up and say, I'm on the side of the members with this, and someone.
So now he's important also because Local 89 is such a large local union. The Air Hub, I think, is in Louisville for UPS, and also I think he had ties with the Car Haul division, and other parts, not just UPS, of the Teamsters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe he had run with Fred Jaguar. It was a prior union election, but he was always independent-minded. But there had always been kind of a little bit of a gulf between the more militant forces and then some more of the independent union leaders. And I think that's when a lot of unity really started to happen. People who were in a militant caucus in the Teamsters called Teamsters for a Democratic Union, and people like Fred Zuckerman all kind of got together and said, we're on the same page when it comes to this. And it was really inspiring. That was the first UPS contract I'd gone through. And when I saw, wow, there are a lot of other people in this union who think like I do, who think we need a better deal, and that our job isn't to just defend the profits of the company. Our fight is to our job is to fight for a square deal for the members, to actually gain as much as we can every contract negotiation. So yeah, that 2013 to me, that was a huge turning point.
And then the aftermath of that, Fred Zuckerman ran for president against Hoffa. Am I right?
Yeah.
And could you tell us a little bit about that election and what happened there?
Yeah, it was incredible. It was the first national union election I'd ever worked on, and so in Jacksonville we were driving around all through as much of the South as we could get to, and talking to members, telling them about, hey, these are the folks who stood up against the last contract. If they were UPSers, if they were, we got lots of members at lots of different companies. Some are under national contracts, some are under local agreements called white papers. And, there were lots of problems. The IBT was not giving the necessary support to do industry-wide bargaining that would have helped a lot of local unions out.
So just to go back, a white paper contract is just, they say it because it's on white paper often, but it's a contract with just a single employer. So it's not like you are just in a local area. So it's not like a national agreement like UPS where it's so big they print it up and have nice little booklets and things like that. So
yeah. The booklets, our contract booklets are very tiny, but they're a fun read.
Okay, so Fred Zuckerman ran for president, and then the result of that was he didn't win, right?
Yeah.
How did people kept on fighting? Could you talk a little bit about how the results of that election happened, and how that played out, and then going forward afterwards?
Well, I think one of the most significant things was how well he did, because he didn't, he barely lost. It was incredibly close, but at the same time, a couple important things happened. We won trustee and we won some regional vice presidents in the southern region and in the central, I think. Yeah, I think in the southern and central. We won some vice presidents that we sent up to the national union. We sent them there to fight for us.
So prior to that, the entire international, because there's Canadians and Puerto Ricans as well, but the entire international executive board was all Hoffa people before that. Mm-hmm. So with this election, even though Fred Zuckerman didn't win, what you're saying is there were people on the board who you considered reformers.
Yeah. And then that was really historic, because if you're the president of a national union, you want your entire executive board to be on your side, right? You don't want there to be, every time you go to a meeting, even though if you're just handing down diktats, you don't want there to be 5-6 people in a corner saying, hey, I don't know about this UPS contract. I don't think y'all are doing a good job, or why aren't we organizing this or that industry? You want to have everyone basically rubber stamping what you say. And Hoffa, we denied that to Hoffa Jr. The other big thing was that the Zuckerman got I think 47-48% of the vote, but the local leadership, local union presidents around the country, the percentage that actually supported Fred were very, very small. And I think a lot of these local leaders started to see that their locals were, even though the local leadership was telling all their members, vote for Hoffa Jr., vote for Hoffa Jr., a lot of local members weren't following that. My local was a good example. Our local leadership pushed really hard for Hoffa Jr., and we campaigned pretty hard, and we got our members in our local voted for Zuckerman. And I think a lot of local leaders looked around and saw that and said, "Oh God, something's got to give. We can't have, if we can't convince our own members and our own locals to vote the way we're asking them to, then maybe we need to reconsider, what we're pushing, and maybe."
So the situation on the ground with local leaders was maneuvering, and be either some maybe showed courage, but others just saw what their members were saying, and it was a survival technique for them.
Mm-hmm.
So in the aftermath of that election, Fred Zuckerman, and I remember it was pretty early. He said he not only wasn't going to run for president, but he was going to support a guy named Sean O'Brien, who's now the current president, and they came together and put together a slate that eventually won. Can you talk a little bit about who is Sean O'Brien and where did he come from? And I know you supported him for president. Why did you?
It's a good question. Because there were conversations about that. So Sean O'Brien's out of Local 25 in Boston. Yeah, Sean O'Brien from Boston. No, who would have known? He comes out of Boston. And historically, kind of similar to Fred Zuckerman, there actually had been a pretty big gulf between him and like what I would say is the kind of class struggle unionists, the militants of the Teamsters, right? There had been a lot of big fights between him and a local in Providence, Rhode Island, Local 251, which is led by some really good folks. But what really came out of it is, once again, there were a lot of problems in the national union, but once again, the UPS contract showed how important it is as kind of a bellwether for how things are going in the Teamsters. And the 2018 UPS contract was, 2013 was when all the supplements, got rejected. 2018 is when the contract got rejected. It got rejected outright. And that was when they were creating a 2-tier workforce of drivers. It was once again a very, very paltry part-time wage increase, and it was overtime. There were no catch-up raises for current part-timers.
Let me go back a second. So you talked about a 2-tier wage system for drivers. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about wages or benefits, or what is 2 tiers first off, and then how did that look for who got what tier?
Mm-hmm. So this is anyone who's either an auto worker. There's a lot of industries this happens in. But one of the more aggressive maneuvers by companies is to create new 2-tier structures or 3-tier, 4-tier. And what that tier system means is that, okay, everyone knew coming to this job, and it's a job, everyone's doing the same job. In our case, it was package car driving. The folks you see, out in the brown cars delivering your packages, that was one job. That was, you were called a package car driver. And the company said, no, we want to create a new thing. And we need this because we're going to start delivering on the weekends. We're going to call these people something called 22-4s. And we're going to pay them less. They're not going to have access to the...
Why do they call them 22-4s? That's an odd name.
Yeah, why would you come up with something, an obscure number? It's because it's in our contract. The article was going to be under Article 22, Section 4. Because the real name was combination drivers, and they were just drivers. But they got a worse wage scale. They didn't have access to things, a lot of our forced overtime protections, which are something called the 9-5 list, which is about not being forced to work over 9.5 paid hours a day too many times a week. And then something called 8-hour requests, which are, we unionists fought for the right to have, voluntary overtime in an 8-hour day a long time ago. In UPS, that's not something we have. We have a couple protections against it, but you can apply for something twice a month called an 8-hour request. And so they wanted to deny these rights and pay less to this new tier of drivers. And people saw it for what it was. It was an attack by the company, and the union sold it. They sold it like it was something good for us. And they must have thought we were the dumbest fools around, because they thought we'd believe it. And the reality is the majority of members said, no, we don't believe that. We think this is a bum deal. And they voted it down.
Okay. And then in the aftermath of that is where the election of O'Brien and running with Zuckerman came about.
Yeah.
And so what role did O'Brien play in all this?
Well, O'Brien was actually the original negotiator for the 2018 contract. And he was replaced by a guy who's really just not even worth mentioning his name. He did that poor of a job. But O'Brien was the original negotiator, and he didn't want 2-tier. He said, we got to take on this company. We got to do a contract fight. And even though historically he certainly was a Hoffa Jr. supporter, he, one thing Hoffa Jr. did not allow was any disloyalty. So he said, all right, O'Brien, you want to be like that? You're out. You're no longer the chief negotiator for the UPS contract. And, that he then led the opposition to the contract, because when that came out, when we voted it down, the International Union used a almost never used rule, which says if less than 50% of a membership vote on a contract, then they have to reject it by 66%. In order for it to actually get rejected. And it's a rule that it's insanely undemocratic, right? Because lots of people don't vote. It's by mail. Things get lost in the mail. The huge percentage of the membership has like a high turnover because of the huge amount of part-time workers. But also it's just insane to suggest that, if you're 45% of people and you vote down a contract, who's to say that doesn't matter? And that's what Hoffa argued. And when they pushed it through, even people who liked the contract still thought that was mess. I talked to a lot of members who voted for the contract and still thought, that's messed up. I cannot believe Hoffa Jr. did that. And what it was a signal to the companies. It said, all right, we got your back. Even if our members don't like this, we'll still push it through. And UPS was pleased as punch. I guarantee you that when they heard that Hoffa Jr. was pushing through the contract, they pop champagne bottles in corporate offices and Manhattan lofts, all around the country, celebrating that decision. And UPS was pleased as punch. I guarantee you that when they heard that Hoffa Jr. was pushing through the contract, they pop champagne bottles in corporate offices and Manhattan lofts, all around the country, celebrating that decision. And, the same way that Fred Zuckerman really led the Vote No movement in a lot of ways in 2013, O'Brien led it in 2018. But it was picked up by a lot. I mean, he was able to lead it because so many people were rejecting that contract.
Okay, so in the period after the contract was voted down and the elections for international officers, you actually ran for office yourself. You ran for the executive board of your local 512 in Jacksonville, Florida. What did that look like? What kind of how did you plug it in? Did you talk just about local issues, or did you talk about the UPS contract and some of the things you're talking about now? How did your campaign look? Something in one locality at that time?
Yeah, no, that's I think especially coming out of that O'Brien's leadership of the Vote No movement in 2018 and the huge upsurge that happened out of that, I think a lot of people around the country realized that we got this big election in 2021 coming up. It's important we get, Hoffa Jr. or a successor out of there. But in the Teamsters, local unions are really important. This isn't true in every union, right? Some unions, you got larger groupings of locals that are really important. Some unions, the national union is the most important thing. In the Teamsters, local unions control a lot of money. They control a lot of organizing efforts. They have a fair bit of autonomy. So around the country, this has been happening, but we felt the same thing in Jacksonville. Was what we want to have a union that really fights, that isn't on the wrong side of these issues, right? That supports. When we have national union leaders that want to fight, we support them. When we don't, we tell them what's what. And so I ran as a trustee, and I was a package car driver at the time as well. And we barely lost. And for a first time run against entrenched leadership had been there for 20 years, 19, 20 years. It was a big deal that we came, this close. Obviously, I would have loved to have won, but union leadership structures are very powerful. They're very, very hard to beat. Usually it takes like battering down a door at a castle. You got to hit it a couple times. And, we were excited that we only barely lost. And what we saw going to all the different work sites is that they're all the similar problems. People said, why did we get the substandard contract? We all wanted to fight more, but we were told we couldn't. And, we were starting to see same issues all over the place. Stewards not being given enough latitude to really go out there and fight companies, contract negotiations not going where they need to go, and seeing that made us realize, this is important in Jacksonville. It's important in locals around the country that we turn these locals into fighting locals. And that's, it's not just enough to win at the top. You got to win at the base too. And that's one thing that we really, really recognize coming out of that.
So your local union leaders then in 512, local president, secretary, treasurer, et cetera, were loyal then to Hoffa. Mm-hmm. And given all this, that you've been talking about, the major concessions, et cetera, why were they loyal to Hoffa? Why did they stick with this guy who was not not fighting for the working class.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes even good leaders, Hoffa Jr. was in power for a long time, right? And it's punishing to be, if you have a national president like Hoffa Jr. and you're a local union leader and you're trying to constantly push for the best things of their members, or you're not local in the national union can make your life pretty hellish. And I think that happened to a lot of local leaders. I think that happened at our local, for example. But I think it's always the safe bet. And going for safe bets, going for the more conservative option is, it might provide a little bit of safety to some of these locals or to the union movement generally in the short term. But in the long term, what it does is it makes the membership disinterested. It leads to worse and worse contracts. It leads to like a lowering percentage of unionization in any given industry. And I think that's why a lot of these local leaders stayed with Hoffa Jr. in both most recent elections. Though that did change a fair bit during this most recent one. But yeah, they did. I think especially in the South, there's a lot of very, very conservative union leaders who believe, oh, the South's got, there's so little union organization in the South. We can't be too aggressive with these companies. We should just be happy that we have them in the first place. And, that's something I don't believe at all. I think if in the South we're going to reinvigorate trade unionism and militancy in our class, we got to be aggressive. We got to confront things that the employer does to divide workplaces. We got to go out, organize new industries, and we have to really insist that the national union make the South a really central element. Because if we're organizing national industries and they're not organized down in the South, we're pulling the rest of the country's wages and standards down. A lot of industries are moving down to the South because they can pay less, right? And it's really up to, I think, Southern union leaders to be aggressive about that. And not rest on their laurels and not do the safe conservative thing, which is generally, to support the kind of cruddy, union leadership under Hoffa Jr.
So you mentioned earlier class struggle unionism, and that's I think what you're calling for is militant tactics and aggressively taking on these companies that have been an anchor in the South on the rest of the country. And so, how would you do that? How does that look? I mean, what is, you just go out on strike everywhere? Or, I mean, where do you start?
It's important for people to know that, it doesn't mean, you're at every single point, you go to, plan X or whatever. What it means, class struggle unionism, it's kind of like it does what it says on the tin. It's unionism that's based on engaging as much of your class as possible. Sometimes that's the members you represent when you're talking about a contract negotiation. Sometimes it's a much broader thing when you're talking about organizing new members. And it's getting them to struggle. It's engaging as many of your membership, as much of your membership, as many members of the class, workers in any given industry, to struggle, to fight. Because what I've noticed, what I've learned in my 11 years as a Teamster is that there are so many, rank and file, everyday people who are really heroes, who all they have to do is be engaged into the fight, right? If a lot of unions right now are characterized by jealousy, holding on to power. You win, you're working in a warehouse, you're driving a truck, you're doing this, and you finally win an election, and you get to work in an air-conditioned office all day. You get to work basically, hours that are a little bit more reasonable. You're not breaking your body anymore doing a manual labor job. You get jealous of that. You want to keep it. And, sometimes they can lead you to make really, really bad decisions. And a lot of that means not engaging the membership, not wanting to have them fight. Because fighting is a risk. A strike is a risk. Any sort of, hardcore contract campaign is a risk. Going out and organizing new members and spending money on that is a risk. But like any struggle or war or anything, it's based on risk. Napoleon didn't become a great general by, never taking risks. And the union movement in the United States wasn't built on not taking risks. And, so it doesn't mean striking all the time, but certainly means engaging the membership and being ready to do that, and certainly giving a real threat of it. There's a lot more that, I think class struggle unionism takes into account, like our really bad, system of labor control, where we have all these labor laws that are designed for us to lose every time when we follow them. So that's a risk too, is looking at those laws and seeing, which ones of these should we treat as illegitimate. And I think that's kind of a tried and true method in trade unionism, is looking at what prevents us from being successful and how do we change that, disregard it, and how do we engage as much of our membership as possible. Because at the end of the day, trade union leaders, they become very good at a couple things. They become good at sitting at a table and negotiating. They get good at arguing grievances. There's a lot of real skill there. There's no doubt about that. And it takes time to learn those things. But you only win because members, you can't win a strike because your business agents go out on the picket line, You only win a strike when members are out there, and they're willing to put themselves on the line. You only win a contract campaign or have a good contract campaign, not because business agents are there handing out, a little card saying, hey, download the app. You do it when business agents and union leaders are engaged, getting their steward network to get involved and having big rallies. And so people are seeing, oh, wow, everyone's excited about this. It's not just I'm going home at night and hoping the folks who I elected to the hall are doing a good job. You're going home at night saying, I'm going to be a part of this. And, to me, that's what's required.
So, the idea of class struggle unionism, there's in the Teamsters, and this is, somewhat unique to the Teamsters, I think there's a home in a national organization called Teamsters for a Democratic Union for class struggle unionists and others, but I think it's a natural home for the militants and the fighters. I still am a retiree member of TDU, but I've been a member for many, many years. And but the active members are the ones that run TDU, Teamsters for a Democratic Union. Could you say a little bit about what TDU is and what role it's played, for you and for others around the country?
Yeah, well, we're really lucky in the Teamsters to have a group like TDU. I mean, the reality is, there's been a lot of local leaders I think that have historically really disliked or been suspicious of Teamsters for a Democratic Union, and I think a lot of those local leaders, some of them are really coming to change their mind on that. Fred Zuckerman and Sean O'Brien being the most famous examples of that. Sean O'Brien was actually at the most recent TDU convention, and he basically said, yeah, well, we're here to work together. And I think he said himself he felt like he was short-sighted in the past by, brushing them off or being overly suspicious. And it is a home, I think, for the very, very best elements, the very best, militant leaderships around the country. They're the ones generally bringing their members to TDU. TDU, if you go to a convention, right? So my first convention was back in 2012, I want to say, maybe 2013. And, you go there and the first thing, it's business. You're there to learn. You're there to meet people. You're going, they'll put on workshops that, expose you to information you would never learn as a regular member. Even as a regular steward, you might not ever learn, especially if your local is not too keen on teaching it too much. But so that's been a really important element. But historically, I mean, TDU transformed the Teamsters from being, probably, you watch a couple movies about the Teamsters like The Irishman or Hoffa, and you may come out with this really insane, kind of thought, and it's like, oh, the Teamsters they're corrupt. They've always been corrupt. The Teamsters have always had really, really good militant members, local leaders around the country, but it was really mobbed up, and that's one of the many things that came out of the Red Scare. But it also came with organized crime infiltration of the Teamsters, and so TDU members were, going to conventions and getting their heads bashed in by basically mob thugs, and they're the ones who made the Teamsters from that and pushed hard enough and, got constitutional provisions changed to make us, I would argue, one of the most democratic unions. A lot of national unions, you vote for a representative, they go to a big convention, and then they vote for who's the president. That's not how it works in the Teamsters. It is a direct membership vote. Everyone gets to vote for a national union leadership. And that's because of TDU. TDU is fought to expose, outright, we call them like class collaborators, right? Like people who are openly taking bribes from employers. I mean, there's crazy examples of local union leaders taking, tickets, taking money, taking bribes that the companies, they're giving a bribe of $200,000 worth of goods and services and money to a union leader. That's a drop in the bucket for a company. They love that. They're like, you can do that and you can save $10 million on a contract. That's a great deal for a company. The union leader makes out, gets to buy a nicer house, maybe gets to buy a boat, take his family out on, and the membership all makes less. They all get their health care cut. They all get worse provisions. And TDU has been, I think, at the front of exposing that kind of thing. And I think now they're transitioning more into, TDU is now not fighting the national union. They're, in some cases, part of it and leading parts of the national union. I think a current UPS contract is a good example. We got some TDU members who are both, on the executive board for one, but also on the, on major staff positions, helping to organize the national UPS contract right now.
So I'm going to give a plug here for TDU as well. Our Fight Back Radio listeners may not know, but I was a Teamster for 20 years and a member of TDU for almost all of that. And every fall they have their convention, and this year it's going to be in Chicago. It has been for a while. And I encourage you to come to this convention if you're a Teamster, or to look at the website for TDU. It's tdu.org. We'll put both of those things in the show notes. But there's no better place. The best Teamsters in the country will be there. And if you can be there, well, I shouldn't say if you're a Teamster, you should be there. And I wanted to give that plug to TDU because it really putting the energies of the best people together makes all the difference in the world. So let me, I want to circle back again though to this. We started talking about class struggle unionism, but you mentioned, some of the people were moving to support O'Brien and Zuckerman, who weren't class struggle unionists, maybe saw the ground shifting underneath them and were just trying to save their jobs, or maybe saw the light and were influenced by their members. Maybe they were scared but not happy with how long. It doesn't matter the reasons, but there's been this alliance, I think, or a united front, some would say, between the class struggle unionists and some of these more, conservative business unionists, some would say. Why, is that a good thing? And what does that mean? And how do you navigate that as a class struggle militant in Local 512?
Yeah, I think whenever you're trying to take on something huge like a multi-billion-dollar corporation, you ain't going to do it with a small group. You're going to do it with a big group. And I think to the extent that the folks who want to take on UPS, take on Amazon, take on any of the companies we represent, the idea is to build as large of a united front as possible. And I think it's absolutely a good thing. Now, it's like you said, there's a lot of reasons a lot of these local leaderships moved over, and some of them just moved over to supporting Sean and Teamsters United, which was the electoral group that was created for the last two elections. A lot of people moved over, and we actually know that because in this most recent election, before there's a vote, there's all the Teamster leaders we send representatives, and then they vote, and you need at least I believe a 5% minimum to get accredited and make sure that you're on the ballot. And what happened at this most recent the convention before the election was that Sean O'Brien actually won amongst all the representatives who were sent, most of whom are local leaders. He actually won against his opponent, Steve Verma, who's a guy from Denver. And that's like unprecedented. I mean, like for an opposition figure to come in, because Steve Verma was Hoffa Jr.'s, successor. Hoffa Jr. said, he gave him a little cross and he said, I appoint you as my successor next. And, for people to come out there and vote for Sean over him, I think Sean, a lot of us started to feel pretty confident. We knew there was going to be a lot of work to do in the election, but we're like, okay, well, we know we're going to get more of a higher percentage of the members than the local leaders, and a majority of the local leadership was supporting Sean. Yeah, I think I think for some of them, there's a couple things. Some of them, you see where your membership's going, and you don't want to be on the outs. A, with someone who you think is going to be the next president of the union, but B, you don't want to be on the outs with your membership. If you're constantly opposing what the membership's doing when it comes to contracts, when it comes to electoral choices in the Teamsters. Memberships are going to look at that and they might vote you out. They might say, you're not really representing enough. Why are we sending you to the hall every day if we can't agree on basic things like this? So I think a lot of them see that. I think a lot of local union leaders genuinely are looking at these past contracts and looking at some new organizing opportunity, and they're realizing we can't continue to do what we've been doing. Even if they're, maybe they don't embrace class struggle unionism, maybe I don't agree or that, with everything they do, or maybe maybe they don't engage the membership the way I think they ought to. They do recognize that something's got to change. And they knew Sean was that change, and they knew, Hoffa Jr. and his successor were going to be more of the same, more bad contracts, more of the membership saying no, to the national union leadership. And there wasn't going to be any real, big campaigns going on. So, I don't know, to me, it's a good thing, that more local leaders. It's a good thing that Sean went from being, kind of with Hoffa Jr. to being, siding more with the folks who want to fight more with the militants.
So we're just coming off what Sean O'Brien and others on the e-board called for a national week or month of action. There was a number of activities in August around the UPS contract. Could you talk a little bit about what that was, what the significance of it was, and how all these different locals, which in the Teamsters, they do have a lot of autonomy. They can do it or not, or they can put a lot of work and effort and money and resources into it or not so much. How did that, why did he call this, Action Month, and what happened exactly, and how do you assess it?
Well, that's one thing Sean campaigned on pretty hard, and Teamsters United really sold, when we were going around campaigning in the last election, was that we were going to take on UPS real hard, that there was going to be a really big contract campaign, that we were going to get the membership involved in it, that there wasn't going to be an information brownout, and people would know what was going on in negotiations, and that one big difference is that negotiations this time aren't going to start a year ahead of time. And they're, because historically Hoffa Jr. would try and wrap up negotiations as early as possible, calm the UPS execs down, and then spend the rest of the time selling the contract to the members. And, that's different this time. I think now we're doing a contract campaign. We're doing strike readiness and strike preparation. So like I said, it doesn't mean we'll necessarily go on strike. There's a fair shot at that. It means the company thinks if we did, we would win it. And I think it's like anything, if you're climbing a mountain, you only realize how far you've gone when you look down and see how far away the ground is. The last two contracts they weren't contract campaigns. They were contract salesmanship. They were trying to sell us a bad contract, and the membership said no both times. This time is just way different. So August was kind of a day of action turned into a week of action, turned into a month of action. And so the National Union called for locals all around the country who represent UPS workers to to have parking lot meetings, have parking lot rallies, to hand out information, to give out information to the members about what our demands are, and to start to get people ready. Start to talk to people about, hey, if we're going to go on strike, you need to save up your money. That has not happened before. The most that ever happened before was handing out a couple pins a little bit before the contract was going to expire. So August was 1 year. Our contract expires in now about 11 months. So July 31st of 2023, our next contract will expire. So if we strike, that's when it would be. The locals around the country, honestly, I was actually very impressed. You got some of your locals, they're going to be at the forefront. Local 804 in New York, 705 in Chicago, 251 in Providence. I mean, there's a lot of good locals out there that I think are led by some really good people. And
strong TDU chapters, I think, too.
Yeah. And that's exactly where, all three of those locals have a lot of people who are in TDU. And, they were having these mass rallies. It was really impressive stuff. But, I expected that. What I was surprised by was how many locals did answer, even locals who didn't even side with Sean O'Brien, answer the call. And that is really different than when Ron Carey, who was our last good president back in the 90s, president before Hoffa Jr.,
I remember this.
Yeah.
There was a strike at UPS in 1997, and a lot of the old guard, we call them, people that didn't support Carey and the class struggle unionists, they tried to sabotage stuff. In fact, here in Chicago, Local 710 told their members, because they had a separate agreement, to cross the picket lines and to go to work and to be scabs. But I'm interrupting you. But
no,
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, see, folks, that's the historical analysis you can't hear with Fight Back Radio. 90s Teamsters experience. This is really different this time. I saw locals, and the Teamsters were very good about promoting this. Locals all around the country were having parking lot rallies, and even if they weren't doing that, they were putting out business agents were going out and handing out the demands and letting people know what's what. Engaging in collective walk-ins where everyone would put on a Teamster shirt and all walk in together. That's an important thing, because if we're gonna win, a strike potentially, at the very least, we're gonna get a good contract. We need as few locals as possible to be, trying to throw gears trying to throw wrenches in the gears of the contract campaign and of what the IBT is trying to do. So for me, that was incredible. You had some locals who were, kind of did the bare minimum, only had a couple pieces of flair on, were just handing out the one little cue card saying download the app. But even they didn't want to completely refuse what Sean and the National Union were calling for. So for me, that's a great sign, but proof's in the pudding. We're at the beginning of a contract campaign. We're not at the middle or the end of it. And the next year, 11 months or so, is going to be whether we see, the National Union continue to push stuff out like this, continue to, to show UPS the middle finger when required and do tough negotiations, and to, get local unions who can sometimes be pretty darn hesitant to engage their membership, because they're always worried about elections. And, if I engage people, are they going to run against me next time? Can the National Union get these local unions to get their membership out? Can the National Union appeal to them directly? And, if this August was any sign, then the answer is yeah. They can. And that's really good news for anyone who wants a better contract.
So a union contract, whether it's a big union operation like UPS and the Teamsters, or even a small one, like we're some of these Starbucks stores that are organizing now, hopefully they'll get a national agreement. But right now there might be a store of 9 people or 10 or something. But a union contract and a union representation covers everything, wages, hours, working conditions, and it affects real people's lives in their ability. Can I send my kid to college? Can I take a vacation? What can I do with my life? If somebody gets sick, do I have enough money to afford things? And so, these collective efforts by people across, the working class to fight for better things in the contract are so important. And I encourage all our members and all our listeners to Fight Back Radio to support this very important campaign. I think what the Teamsters are going to be doing at UPS will be probably setting the table for working people across our entire country. But I want to shift gears for a minute here, and I want to ask you about Frank Ordonez. Could you tell our listeners who that is and why you know that name and why Teamsters across the country may know that name?
Yeah, so if people are familiar, Frank Ordonez was a UPS driver in Miami. So very familiar with the kind of job he's doing. I'm also a UPS driver in Florida. So, delivering out there in the heat, it can be rough. You can sometimes be dealing with unruly customers. And, but in addition to that, the job isn't just dangerous because of the heat or because of the, because of traffic or what have you. It's also dangerous because, the crime happens, Sometimes UPS drivers get shot at. Sometimes UPS drivers deal with, angry people who come out there with weapons. In his case, he got carjacked by some folks who I think were robbing a jewelry store, if I'm not wrong. And what happened is he got carjacked, but he was basically taken as a hostage. And what the police did down there is, instead of trying to de-escalate, because they're aware that there's a hostage in the UPS truck, they not only followed the truck, they hid behind regular people driving to and from work, driving on the freeways of Miami, hid behind their cars and unloaded dozens of bullets into the car of a package car, Frank Ordonez, and killed them. And it was something that really affected all of us, because that could happen to you. That if you're getting someone's aiming a gun at you, you're a UPS driver, we can't by law bring weapons with us on the truck. So you're going to do what they say, and you're going to hope, that you can get back home to your family at the end of the day. And he probably could have had the police down there not empty, round after round after round into his package car. And you could see it is, it'll make you cry as a UPS driver, because or really as anyone, because you could see the blood coming down when they killed him. And UPS afterwards, like the company UPS, whose driver was killed by the police, right afterwards, they sent a big thank you to the police of Miami. They sent a thank you to the folks who killed him, who could have done anything in the world to de-escalate the situation. And, I think to a lot of us, we all thought, well, if that happens to me, I do not want, I don't want, the cops emptying their magazines into my package car. I hope that I can, get home safe. And that really freaked, I think, a lot of package car drivers who wouldn't normally think about that, to actually start thinking about that. The police aren't always they ain't there to make sure you get out alive necessarily. They don't necessarily have your best interest at heart. And that's an important thing for anyone, who works any union job or non-union job to remember when you're facing a dangerous situation. is that people like Frank Ordonez are, he should be alive. He should have been able to go home to his family. He should have, been able, really should be able to finish his day without incident. But if someone's going to carjack you, you shouldn't be, blown to smithereens by, police who are too trigger happy.
Yeah, no, it's the listeners to Fight Back Radio. I know we've had a number of guests previously that talk about community control of the police and the importance of the police not representing the 1%, but that we need to control the police rather than the police trying to control the working class or being a tool of the rich. Whatever, you can see UPS's relationship with them. But I remember when this happened, and the fact that it got this kind of attention from drivers around the country, not just in Florida, and people were taken by the fact that a guy his safety was being threatened, and the police really had no regard for it at all. Could you also talk a little bit about the role you're trying to unite people across your union to fight for a better contract or for all kinds of different things, and within our society we're dealing with racism, sexism, national oppression, all these kinds of things. How do you navigate that? How do you get people united when there's people that Trump, when he was president, was saying build a wall, and all these kinds of the flaming rhetoric from the right wing, and which has to be affecting some 300,000 people. I'm sure it affects a lot of them. How do you navigate that? And as a militant fighter in the union, how do you deal with the questions of racism or sexism on the job?
Well, yeah, especially, I think this is true throughout the entire country, but I think especially in the South, one of the most powerful tools that employers, the ruling class, the bosses have used, is racism and sexism, and especially to divide the workforce, make us not fight as effectively, prevent new organizing campaigns. They've used it forever because it works, right? And one of the, I'd say, prime directives of any trade unionist is to recognize that and to constantly fight against it, right? It's true both from the employers, sometimes you have really over, in union contracts, we try and put as many provisions in to base things on what's called seniority, and that's how many years you have in a company, right, or in a classification or position. And you do seniority because that's the only thing that's fair. Because if you give any latitude to these managers, it all comes down to their personal belief. Is your manager secretly in the Klan, which in Florida absolutely is not outside of the realm of possibility? Well, if you don't have union protections, or if your union protections aren't enforced, well, that's going to lead to something. That's going to lead to new black drivers being disqualified or being harassed. It's going to be, they might be a guy who says, I don't really trust women package car drivers. I don't really think they should make it. What if she gets pregnant? I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to make sure she gets disqualified. It's our job to constantly identify that, because what that does is not only is it just, an outrageous injustice to the individual worker, it weakens the union in its entirety, right? And, because not those folks who are either denied the jobs or harassed or deal with, that kind of crap on the job, they're going to ask the same questions. Where's my defense? Where's my protection? Where's the union? Where are people looking out for me? And that's the good question to ask. And the union's job is to actually be there and to be analyzing that. And I think some unions trying to kind of take a, what they might call a race blind, attitude towards things. We don't see that. It doesn't matter whether you see it or not. It's right there in front of you, it's even within unions. I've seen it. I've seen it myself directly, and it's something that weakens unions very, very much so. And like I said, this is true around the country, but I would especially say in parts of the South, is you'll get kind of good old boys clubs forming. I've seen really good stewards, the best in their classification, the best at what they do, skipped over for business agent jobs, right? Business agents, kind of a steward is kind of you're still working the job generally, at least for us in UPS. You're still working the job, but you're kind of the first elected position. You're the shop floor leader, and you're elected. You have some additional legal rights. And a business agent generally works full time, right? And the thing about business agents is they're generally most of the time appointed, not elected. And so if a union leadership is they want to keep that good old boys club, maybe they'll pass over a black steward for a business agent position. And what's the result of that? Result is that the steward looks around and says, hey, why am I getting passed over all the time for these jobs? But, in addition to that, you're going to have a lot of black workers who will say, I'm going to be not super trusting of my union. If they call a strike, maybe I won't be so interested in that. You're going to have people looking at the union leadership and, saying, why would I want to build any union with that if they're skipping over, the people who I know are the best, skipping over the most talented stewards purely because of their race. And, and what the worst thing is too, is the members are served by, people who are generally incompetent, who, could have been served by a better business agent, a better political, principal officer, a better, better member of the executive board, purely passed over or denied responsibilities because of their race or nationality. That's true in gender too. I mean, you look at a lot, Teamsters, this is big. I mean, I'm a guy, so, I have to work a little harder to be able to see it because sometimes you don't notice it. But, I got a lot of Teamster conventions, you'll see it's like almost entirely guys. And it's different in different industries, and it's not true in every local, that's for sure. But in a lot of them it is. And you're skipping over people who would be more qualified, who are live wires, who've got the energy, who are those, I was saying, like, day-to-day working class heroes who just need to be engaged. And if they're skipped over, I mean, what it does is it harms the union, And in that sense, I think it's a total betrayal of our class.
I want to ask you, excuse me, about the Amazon labor union. Mm-hmm. So here's a union, independent union that organized in Queens, New York, or no, Staten Island. I'm sorry, Staten Island, New York, and used different tactics than I think what we're used to seeing in terms of organizing new members. They're not part of the Teamsters, but they're part of your industry, logistics, as you've said. How should the Teamsters approach Amazon? And the Amazon labor union? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a really good sign of the times, which is that, workers right now are taking advantage of a couple things. They're taking advantage of, I think, like a larger consciousness of trade unionism. That's due to a couple really interesting fights that have happened. And we're in Chicago. Chicago Teachers Union has been the center of a lot of, reminding people what unions can do. But there's been, over the last 5-6 years, people forgot about a lot of the wildcat teacher strikes, about a lot of the new union elections and certifications that have happened. And I think there's a kind of rise in the air. I think a poll came out that unions are as popular as they've ever been since 1960 something, which is incredible because we've suffered incredible setbacks since then, really since the late 70s. And I think what they're doing up in Staten Island and what a lot of Amazon workers have tried to do around the country is incredible. And it's, the obligation of the entire labor movement, but more than anyone, the Teamsters to, be engaging with that full throttle. And I've been pretty happy what I've seen so far, because what happens, right, every negotiation historically, UPS execs come to Teamster leadership. Oh, Amazon's getting bigger and bigger. They're taking over more market share. If we raise wages too much, we're going to lose market share, and then we're going to have less business. And I mean, the answer to that isn't, let's get a worse contract. The answer is that, well, we really got to bust your balls this time because we need a better contract because we need to organize those people. The whole idea of
to provide an example, so Amazon workers want to join the Teamsters, want to be unionized. They see a reason. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Because in industry-wide bargaining, though, the Taft Hartley law, which is something passed in 48?
50s, I think.
50. Yeah. Either way, it was. We've had a lot of rollbacks of labor law. And one of the big things every time they pass a law that attacks unionism, you should look at what they're attacking because that probably means that whatever that is, it works. Because they don't take it away because it doesn't work, take it away because it works. One of those things is, multi-employer bargaining, but really the idea of like industry-wide bargaining. So you can take wages and benefits out of the equation when it comes to, market share, because everyone's getting paid something relatively equivalent. And, that's what the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations is really founded upon. It's in the name, and I think getting back to that is going to be really the saving grace for one of the saving graces for the union movement in the United States, because we have to engage with it. I think the people on the ground are fighting against a system where elections take forever to accomplish, where there's so much harassment. Union activists are fired on the job while they're trying to organize. Once you get recognized, you got to get a first contract, and that's you're deprived of all of these tools to get a first contract, right? Like effective striking, secondary strikes. A lot of laws are set up for them to lose. and they're still doing it. And that's what's really incredible. Whether it's at, we see it other industries like, service like Starbucks and a lot of different fast food places. But for our purposes, Amazon, they do what we do. I see them out there. They're delivering. A lot of these, they don't have a union. So, a lot of times they're running. I'm going at a safe pace, and delivering, doing my job. But, I'm not worried that if I don't go a little bit faster, I'm going to lose my job. I know I have union protection. Amazon driver doesn't know that. They might be misclassified as independent contractor. They're absolutely paid less than I am. And they, at the end of the day, depend on the whims of their manager. They piss their manager off. You're fired. You're not going fast enough. I can get this guy 10 years younger than you who's, a go-getter, and I can get him to, work for a couple years going 1,000,000 miles an hour. I'm going to fire you and I'm going to pull him up.
So that's the difference between having a union contract that covers, even if you've lost things in the last several contracts that you're going to get back this time. Yeah. It's the difference. Unfortunately, we're starting to run out of time here. Is there anything else you want to add or tell our Fight Back Radio listeners before we sign off?
Yeah. Well, just, to wrap up the Amazon thing, I think it's really good. I think this contract is crucial. Getting a good UPS contract is crucial to showing Amazon workers that the Teamsters are here to fight. I'm very excited about what the next year looks like. If you're a Teamster in any industry, I highly recommend you go to the TDU convention this year. I highly recommend you get involved in your union in general. Run for steward. If you're in a bad local, local that doesn't want to fight, doesn't want to engage the membership, start thinking about, what you can do to run against them or to push them in a better direction. I would say whatever you do, get out there and fight and find those everyday heroes that are out there who they want to fight too, and it's our responsibility to find them, to engage them, and bring them into the fight. And that's what I'd say to folks. And last thing, if you're looking for a job, union jobs are always good. I would get a job at UPS. If you get a job in the next year, hey, you can be part of the contract fight.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Richard Blake. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Richard Blake, I think if you listen through, you heard the Teamsters, what's going on there, and you got a sense from somebody who drives a truck every day and actually knows what it's like. So hopefully you enjoyed our interview. If you'd like to reach Fight Back Radio, you can reach us at richard.fightbackradio@gmail.com. It's richard.fightbackradio@gmail.com. And I want to encourage people to go to the Teamsters for Democratic Union Convention here in Chicago. It's going to be October 28th to the 30th. You can find it on their website, tdu.org, and we talked about it a bit in the interview, so look that up. We're going to put it in the show notes as well so you can find it. But if you're a Teamster, you need to hook up with these guys, and I would encourage you to join TDU as well. It's a fine organization, I'll say that. So anyways, also I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. Those of you that have told others, thank you so much. It helps us a lot when you retweet or tweet or whatever. Use the social media to get the word out there so people can find us. We're going to try some new things to pump it up there, but we're very pleased. We've had over 10,000 people have listened to episodes of Fight Back Radio since we started just about 5 months ago. And so we're going to continue to grow, I hope, and we're going to continue to do the things you want. Send me an email if you have ideas on how we can make the show better. We do this for you, for the activists, and for our listeners. So I want to, first I want to thank the people that make this all happen. Dodd McLaughlin, Shane Tremley, and Vince Olson. They're the Fight Back Radio team, and they make this happen every 2 weeks. So we appreciate them so much. So for the entire Fight Back Radio team, I'm Richard Berg, saying until next time, all power to the people.